falling for some certain narratives about Ukraine making some important gains on Russia right now. And I'm just gonna remind you, as usual, it's bullshit. Russia still doesn't have a full mobilization yet, comrades. Not even close. It doesn't. It's like not even on the cards. Like it's not even like something they're thinking about needing to do. So the idea that like that Ukraine is like making these fucking dramatic fucking impacts on Russia is not true. What they're doing is engaging in like as much pointless terrorism as possible, with the narrative that they're going to gain bargaining chips by doing so. But all they're really doing is like fucking. All they're really doing is like doing these drone strikes on various infrastructure, a lot of it not even military infrastructure, and then like cutting up. Like there was an area where there was an oil supply problem because they struck an oil refinery that was mostly used for like people in the area that was like for their heating fuel and stuff like this. And so Russia had to like reorganize and like resupply from elsewhere. So it's able to like overcome those things, right? All I heard was Ukraine was shelling Crimea. Yeah, I've heard that too, but I heard that they were making like gains in areas. Yeah, I mean, that's what Ukraine has essentially, that's how Ukraine has fought this war. It's backed by the US, right? It's fighting a proxy war for the US. So, of course, its strategy is to just hit civilian areas constantly. And I'm not saying that Russia doesn't hit any civilian targets ever either, but I'm just saying that Ukraine purposely targets civilian areas. Russia doesn't actually, despite the popular like narrative that we hear from the West, right? And the reason it doesn't is because one reason it doesn't, it's not necessarily just a morality question, but it's also a question of like they are showing that they're fighting a different way on purpose, very purposefully. Not just to like show Western or something that has nothing to do with it, but because of they're actually fighting to try and liberate the people in Donbass. Yeah, I said that. Russia's special military operation does have an anti-fascist character to it. As much as our friends on the left might not want to admit that, it does. The way that they spin that lie the other way around is by using this Ukrainian fascist expert to then claim that Russia is actually the most fascist country on earth right now. You know, not the source of global fascism in the world, the United States. Russia is actually the most fascist country. And I'm not joking. There's all these Ukraine, like, and they're championed in academia is the experts of fascism. And so I just want to read you this article here from Press TV about the situation, which is that Putin says Russia received a proposal to limit military action. And again, they mentioned those intensified drone attacks I just mentioned. Regarding the intensified Ukrainian drone attacks and the Russian retaliation, Putin said the new proposal also calls for the two sides to refrain from long-range strikes deep inside each other's territory. The Russian leader, however, explained that retaliatory strikes carried out by the country's missile forces on targets deep inside Ukraine were, quote, much more powerful and sensitive than the enemy strikes, which aim to divert attention. Quote, we do not exclude the possibility of attempts by Ukrainian armed forces, unexpected, as the enemy believes, unexpected for us, diversionary attacks with limited tasks by special forces and with the aim of diverting our attention and our forces from solving the main task. The final liberation of Donbass and Novorossiya, he said. Quote, it is clear why this proposal is being made. Because our counterstrikes deep into Ukrainian territory are much stronger, have greater impact, and are frankly more destructive, Putin asserted. The Russian leader also said contacts on negotiations over the Ukraine war are still ongoing, and the Kremlin is waiting for the arrival of U.S. representatives after the hot phase of the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran ends, reaffirming Moscow's readiness to continue peace talks with the United States. See? So who's the one who's prolonging this war? Is it Russia? He said that last year, during the Alaska summit, he and US President Donald Trump had discussed possible ways to resolve the conflict in Ukraine, but no agreement was signed. Quote, but we discussed certain possibilities for ending the conflict in Ukraine. We were asked to accept the compromises formulated by American negotiators. Well, we agreed. Putin confirmed. And this is reported in Press TV. Just click on the source to see the whole article for yourselves, of course. Americans generally cannot fathom that another ostensibly capitalist nation would not want to brutally annihilate its direct neighbor, many of whom and whose inhabitants have family in both nations. Yeah, and this is the thing too, Joint Chief of Staff. Like, I think that there's a very sinister way that this is that the narrative is spun, in the way that it's like Russia is just so evil and it wants to go and take over fucking Ukraine. It's the most asinine like analysis ever, because it actually turns aggressor and victim around, in that the aggressor was the US using Ukraine as a puppet, and the victim is the Russian speaking people in Donbass. Jesus, I'm getting upset. I thought I had to plug my phone in still. But again, and that's why I really do love historically. And I love Escha's work so much. And I hope that you all go and check out Historically on YouTube. And you look at Escha's documentary on documenting Donbass, where she goes and talks to people in Donbass after the Russian invasion. And what you will see and hear from the people in Donbass is not at all what you're being told in Western media, including the most progressive outlets like Amy Goodman, right? And what you have to realize is, like, for you, it's Ukraine is the one that engaged in a genocidal war against Russian-speaking Ukrainians, saying that they weren't Ukrainian, accusing every single one of them of being Russian separatists, actually shelling and engaging in violence in them, and then their president at the time boasting, saying, your children were hide in the basements of your apartment buildings, while our children, the Ukrainian-speaking Ukrainians, will go to school. That's a fucking textbook case of genocide against Russian-speaking Ukrainians. But yet, when Russia intervenes to stop that, it's Russia that is the aggressor. It's the Russian invasion. And again, what you'll find is, since Russia has taken control, since Russia does have military presence in places in Donbass, the previous genocide that those people were facing has stopped, other than strikes from Ukrainian military on occasions. But it's nowhere near at the scale it was before the special military operation began. On Russian language education, in the 2021-2022 academic year, about 100,000 school children were studying Russian or learning it as a foreign language. In 2024, this number decreased 1,000-fold to 345 people. Yep, and that was a policy, Green Eggs and Ham, pursued purposely by the West, by the Ukrainian fucking state, to try to make, to purposefully make the educational environment in Ukraine as hostile as possible to Russian speakers. Bugger, leave the court alone, would ya? But this is not acceptable behavior. Fuck up. Stop it with yourself. Don't make me chase you every 2 seconds. Where am I? I don't want to chase you. Ethno-nationalist laws, ethnic violence against ethnic minorities, suppression of communists, suppression of political opposition, glorifying Nazi collaborators. What does that sound like? Yeah. Exactly. It's hard to empathize with people you can't talk to, not to mention the info control. It's why second language learning is discouraged in the USA. Yep. Yep. Same with like First Nation languages here, Dorian. It's why, like, for all the talk and all the rhetoric from Canada, there's never any effort to like propagate or expand learning of any of the indigenous languages, and they just raise as much hurdles as possible and give grants to natives who don't even like speak the language or whatever in like different academic fucking courses and stuff, right? Yeah. I'm always told they have to stop elections and suppress the Communist Party. They're in wartime. Yeah, and I mean the funny thing about that, Green Eggs, is like, um, if you remember before 2014, um, well, even before 2014, there were communists being murdered and like kidnapped in Ukraine, in Odessa and other places, like literal like communists and others being kidnapped. So, like that outlawing, it didn't wait for the Russian invasion. It started happening before that. Plug, I don't know why you're insisting on being so bad right now. Yeah, well, I mean, they had pogroms against Roma people, Masilimum. I don't know if y'all remember at the time, but like black people were not able to fucking leave the country because they had discriminatory rules and laws in place for like being able to travel. You know, like none of that seemed to like raise the red flags. Everybody just justified that as like, oh, being necessary to fight against like the Russian war machine or whatever. It's why, again, I do say like Russia is one of those litmus tests for communists. No, no, you don't get it. Erecting statues of Nazi collaborators, renaming streets after them is just boost morale. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Woo! See, this hits close to home for me, Joint Chief of Stash, because, you know, our second in command to the Prime Minister decided to leave her job and go become an advisor for Zelensky. Canada. Oh, yeah, sorry, I forgot. She also did it. She also did it with the applause and support of the current prime minister at the time. What's funny, Green Eggs and Ham, before I go on to the next article here, some of you might remember, like, I remember when that special military operation first started happening. How many of you were calling us? How many? I don't know how many were like on this side of things at the time, but I am curious. So, one in chat for those of you who called Zelensky a fascist, only to be met with, how can he be fascist? He's a Jewish man. How many of you got that? Because when the special military operation first began, I was getting that all the fucking time. Every second person I talked to about Zelensky being a fascist would tell me, oh, he can't possibly be a fascist. He's a fucking Jewish man. And then a little while after that, we have, you know, the escalation of the violence against Palestinians. And I noticed a whole bunch of them went away. Bri got that a month ago, so they're apparently still out there. But right before, you might not remember, but right before October 7th, this was a very prominent thing for people to say. That really did, like, diminish greatly after October 7th. I've had people tell me that the US can't be fascist because you can smoke weed. So ridiculous. Here's my thing with that, like, it's like, how do you define fascism? Like, fascism is only what a country does to its own people? Or, like, what? It's protected privileged population, because you're obviously not including black people or native people in your analysis of US not being fascist, right? You're obviously not including all of the people that the US makes war with around the world, right? And yeah, and famously, as you know, the Nazis never did drugs. Just look at Pete Hegseth, right? Man is as sober guy. He's never taken a stimulant in his life, I'm willing to bet. His jaw is just like that. Yeah, the liberal concept of fascism, exactly, which is like an analysis of like the various aesthetics of fascism, but never an understanding that fascism is capitalism in crisis. Right? Or the other thing I like as well is the definition from Lacerda, or the, I guess it's not really from Lacerda, it's a continuation of Frantz Fanon, which is that fascism is colonialism turned inwards, which happens as a result of capitalism being threatened. Domenico Lacerda, you should watch him. And the other thing too, I will say is, like, I'm not saying that Russia is not capitalist, right? I'm not saying that, because it is. But I do warn about being very, very rigid about our understanding of Russia as a capitalist country. Because, like, one thing that you have to understand is, like, unlike in the West, where, like, who's the biggest opposition to Donald Trump or Joe Biden is the people, right? And the biggest supporters of Trump and Joe Biden is the bourgeoisie. Well, the funny thing is, and, like, again, this is something that a lot of people have a hard time coming to grips with. In Russia, like, the biggest opposition to Putin, you might not realize this, isn't like mass amounts of workers. It isn't like the working class in, like, the way it is here. In a sense, some of Putin's biggest opposition are some of the most powerful capitalist interests in Russia that actually have interests, very strong interests, in getting closer with the West. And that is some of Putin's biggest opposition, which is why I'm going to recommend you two videos, including the historically one. So I'm going to say, if on your free time, if you ever have a free hour, please bookmark this video right here. This is Radhika Desai talking with Michael Hudson and Alan Freeman about Russia's economy, about the three of them going to Russia, and then analyzing economic conditions and changes in Russia, as well as their relations with China. I find that video is extremely enlightening and insightful, and that you should look at that. And what you will come to realize is, like, something that I've talked about here oftentimes is, like, in the Duma, the Communist Party, like, in Russia, has tremendous amounts of influence that, like, it just doesn't in any other Western countries. And Putin does talk to the Communist Party and, like, engage with them as a serious political, like, partner, and or a political, like, a member of the Duma struggling for, like, politics in Russia. And he does treat them seriously, contrary to what a bunch of fucking Westerners say. So I would highly recommend that. And again, I'm going to link you to the historically video that I mentioned as well. which is the documenting Donbass right here.
Украинские нацисты даже не скрывают всего того, что делают, потому что гордятся этим.
It is in Russian language, and you'll have to read the subtitles, but I do highly recommend it. Again, this is Esha goes to Donbass and talks to people in Donbass. So you're going to hear on-the-ground interviews from people in Donbass telling you how the situation has changed since the start of the special military operation by Russia. And before we move on to the next news piece, I wonder if I could find that. I wonder if I could find my favorite clip of Putin. I bet I can. Yeah. My favorite clip of Putin right here actually kind of highlights what I was talking about. Remember what I just said, that like Putin's actual biggest like opponents in Russia are actually the oligarchs. The oligarchs that like you always hear the West going on and on about how he just, oh, Putin, he's working for all the Russian oligarchs. He's just a puppet of all the Russian oligarchs, right? I want you to watch this clip because it does kind of demonstrate what I'm talking about, how Putin is actually an opposition of them. And many of them would love someone like a fucking Yeltsin back. But because of Putin's popularity amongst the people of Russia, it's like not even a possibility. It's like so outside the cards that they're actually afraid of Putin. Not because of Putin, but because he has support from the people in a way that none of them can find anybody else who does. That's what you need to understand, first of all. Yeah, there are headlines about it all the time, just not in our news. Exactly, Sinjel. Exactly. TASS is actually a very, very interesting news source to follow. Which is, if you don't know, TASS is the Russian media. Like they're big, like, you know, the government subsidized media. Highly, highly recommend listening to TASS. At least so you can compare it to what you're hearing from the West. I've heard libs joke about the oligarchs falling out of windows if they step out of line. Yeah, Chubby, seriously, some Westerners will joke about it. And then at the same time, make that out to be as like some kind of like proof that Putin works for the oligarchs or like is the ultimate oligarch or something, right? So I find that funny. This clip is so, I love this. This is legendary. It kind of demonstrates what I'm saying.
Vladimir Putin strode into town.
Почему раньше здесь не было людей, которые способны были принимать решения? Почему здесь-то забегали все как тараканы?
Okay, I'll translate it for you. He goes, why didn't you fix this before now? You ran around like cockroaches when I said I was coming.
Unlike Medvedev, Putin confronted the factory owners.
You have taken these people hostage. With your ambition, incompetence, and pure greed. These are thousands of lives. It's absolutely unacceptable. If you owners can't come to an agreement, then this factory will be restarted. Meaning the state will take over. One way or another. We'll do it without you.
He demanded the owners, including billionaire Oleg Deripaska, sign an undertaking to restart the factories.
Did everybody sign this agreement? Deripaska, have you signed it? I've signed it. I can't see your signature. Come sign it. Here's the agreement. Give me back my pen.
Classic Putin. But if a country
Classic Putin
needed a personal visit from the boss to get one factory back to work, then it was in serious trouble.
But seriously, I do want you to think about what you just saw there and compare that with how Biden participated in the worker struggle in the US, right? Seriously, what did Biden do? Remember when he marched in the fucking picket line while he was president of the country? Marched in the picket line like he was just like one of the workers. Like, who are you protesting, Biden? You're the president of the country, you know? Like, all of us were like yelling at the time. Like, what are you doing? You have to sign some executive orders and you can change this. Yeah, and then he broke the strike. That was the ridiculous thing about it. Yes, and that's right. Thank you, Bob. I forgot about that detail too. It was literally a day after he stopped the railroad workers' strike. And then he went and worked with another one. Yes. This right here. Oh my God. Let's give public school teachers a raise. Biden is always tweeting shit like, who the hell is the president? I'd like to have a word with him. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And which is why I really do like that. I love that clip by Putin, because you really see the difference between somebody who's in power that does actually present some kind of material opposition to the oligarchs, to the capitalist class in Russia, versus somebody who just serves them perfectly like Biden. He goes out there, puts on the vest after breaking the railroad workers' strike and marches with them. Like he's fucking one of them, like he really cares about them. Putin went to the factory owners and said, the state is going to take your factory and start it without you if you don't stop this lockout right now. You either stop this lockout right now or the state will take your factory. Right? Like, so effectively ended that worker lockout instantly. So again, you tell me who works more for the capitalists, Putin or Biden, right? And again, it's not a matter like, we're not getting down to like what fucking Putin wants or Putin desires or all that. It's because Putin represents a particular realm of the political spectrum in Russia that relies on support from working masses in Russia. And so what you're seeing is essentially a country that was forced to have its socialist system overthrown and still those labor struggles continuing. And that's why, again, I recommend that Radika Desai piece, because it'll have you think about Russia in a less rigid way than like, oh, it's a capitalist country. It has a socialist experience. It has a socialist consciousness. And I do really agree with the conclusion that Radika Desai and Michael Hudson and them came to in that video, which is that, you know what, as its relations with, and a lot of like those institutions are standing on old like Soviet built institutions in a sense. So like, yeah, I can understand in a way like, that as it gets closer with Russia, that it will be able to move towards a socialist system in a way that Western countries cannot without that rupture. Like we've already had, because they've had that already, you know? And that's the difference that people don't realize. Yeah, Putin is an actual leader because he has the skill and knowledge required to run a country versus most of the West who are literal puppets. Yeah, and it also in a sense, like again, because the Western politicians are relying purely on the financial support and backing of the bourgeoisie, the ruling class, Putin not necessarily as much, right? Like, there's a reason why Yeltsin was ousted so quick. There was always fighting by the masses against Yeltsin. Putin is so popular for a reason. He's not popular with the oligarchs. He's not helped in artificially. He's immensely popular with the masses of Russia. And if he were to change his politics and like, if he were not to like be as much for an independent Russia, for a sovereign Russia, and for actually championing much of the interests of those working people in Russia, then they wouldn't be behind him the way they are. You know what I mean? Like, don't fall into the great man theory. Understand that Putin is there for a reason. What is that reason? right? It's because he represents a particular political line, which is the massive struggle against fucking the Western Western capture of their country for the purpose of turning it into an extraction colony. He represents the resistance against that, and thus an anti-imperialist force in the country. Well, what is the result of anti-imperialism?